Hello there everybody, Scotia here, and welcome to the fourth review for the fourth chapter of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 9, the JoJoLands, and this chapter is called Versus Rohan Kishibe. So, a little bit later on the release of this chapter review, there was just a lot going on basically at the same time that this chapter came out, like at the MK1 reveal came out, the stuff with the Street Fighter 6, like Udon chapters. There's just a lot going on at the time, but unfortunately I had to prioritize, this chapter of JoJoLands last, but I'm finally doing it, it's finally here. So yeah, let's just get into it. I mean, it's actually quite funny, I know it's only been a month since the last review, but I actually kind of have forgotten how to do this, I don't know why, but it'll slowly come back to me as we go. But yeah, I'm basically just going to go through it and just go through the whole chapter and just kind of give my thoughts on things as I go. So yeah, let's just get started. So we start this chapter with Rohan having discovered that something is going on within his holiday mansion. He's already noticed the rain that Jodio used at the end of the previous chapter, using November rain as a means to distract Rohan, but if anything that's just helped him, gather on quicker that something is happening. So as Rohan is leaving to enter the mansion to go investigate the rest of the crew to see what's going on inside the mansion, Jodio is desperately calling Dragona and the others, telling him hey, be careful. Rohan's coming, he knows something's going on, he's also a Stan user, and this is actually Jodio's only appearance in this chapter. He has a line later on in an icon thingy that Araki usually does when he's visually showing who's talking when they're not on screen or on the panel, but that's it, that's the only thing that Jodio has later on. So very, very, Jodio light chapter for this month, which is fine. I'm not against chapters like this where we don't get the protagonist. I actually think in some ways, some of my favourite chapters in previous JoJo parts are the ones where we don't even really see the main JoJo at all. So that's very cool, and I'm open to it. And later on, I hope there are other chapters where we focus on Dragona or Paco or Usagi and other characters that may join the group later on. So completely fine with that. I think it's very cool that Araki has just decided to keep Jodio out of the way, because to be honest, there's really no need for him to be in this chapter much. I mean, at this point, he's still just outside by the pool scouting, so he's not really involved yet, and there'd be no reason for him to keep showing up, because if we go back to Jodio, it'd just be him standing by the pool talking to them, which is we've seen that enough already. So yeah, completely understandable why he's gone. But yeah, I think that's interesting that 4 chapters in and we already have a chapter where the main protagonist is just gone for most of it, so that's pretty cool. We then cut to inside the mansion and we catch up with Dragona, Paco and Usagi, who are still struggling with the string stand that attacked them at the end of the previous chapter, and it's still going badly for the both of them as they're both on the verge of losing their limbs, as the string around their arm and ankle is still tightening, and the pain's getting worse. And it's funny because they're both I say both, mainly Paco. Paco's screaming throughout this chapter before they eventually meet with Rohan, and it's so obvious that Rohan would have heard them from the pool at this point, the way these, especially Paco is just screaming his head off, understandably, a wire string is tightening around his arm or his ankle and he can't get it off, but I don't know, it's just funny to me the whole time I was reading it, and every time Paco would scream, I would just be Rohan has more than likely heard you by now. But yeah, thought that was something that was funny. Usagi then uses the Matehikuda side to make a pair of scissors for Paco as he tries to break free from the string. He uses the scissors to break free from the string, but the string is so strong, he says later, it's titanium. If the actual density of the string, it's translucent, but it feels it's titanium steel. So as Paco's trying to use this pair of scissors to snap the string off, the pair of scissors actually breaks, and the blade of the scissors falls off. And at first, when I first read this chapter, I actually thought the blade that snapped off went through Paco's ankle, but it doesn't look like it does in later panels and stuff, so I don't think it did. But I think that was just my misreading of that panel. But yeah, basically it doesn't work, and the scissors are broke, and that freaks Paco out even more, and he's screaming even more. And yeah, obviously they're all panicking, and Dragona's, very just in awe at this security system, as they call it, and that's when Usagi again is you guys still don't understand that this isn't a security system. This is a stand, we're being attacked right now. And when they're who's attacking us then, what's going on? And then that's when Usagi's I already told you, and he points, and they all see the cat that we've seen throughout the last couple chapters wandering around the villa, and it basically licks its paws and walks off. And that's when Paco is just goes to Usagi, he's just you shut up, you just talking like out your ass basically, like you're just talking a load of nonsense. And there's a kind of like, again, a bit more of the friction within this group, which I do like. I like that this group isn't, you know, just off the bat this like solid group that, like, I'm sure later on like they will become very tight knit, but like at the moment I'm glad like that they're just, you know, not really trustworthy of each other, especially Usagi, who is still like the outsider that they didn't want. Like usually like they're a team of 3, but Usagi, you know, has been forced into this group against their will basically to make a 4. But basically Paco's just like, shut up, like you've been talking nonsense since the minute you joined with us, like, and then they basically just completely ignore him. And obviously it's very apparent that, like, obviously we as the readers know that the stand is more than likely, sorry, the stand user is more than likely the cat. Obviously we could get swerved, and I would not be surprised if we do get swerved, but it's very clear, I think, at this point that this group of stand users aren't very well versed to the full potential of stands and stand users, because obviously we know, like, in the past, like, all sorts of things have been, you know, stand users, like animals, even like inanimate objects. Like, it's very clear to us after like 9 parts of JoJo that there is no specific rule of like, this can be a stand user, this cannot be a stand user, but obviously these people don't know that yet. So Paco and Dragona basically just, you know, hand wave Usagi's accusation of the cat, and they just try to move on, and they're just desperate to get the string off and get out of there. As far as they know, they've got the diamond, they're this close to escaping. So yeah, they try and move on, but that's when Jodio calls them and is like, hey, like, Rohan is in the mansion, he's on the way to you, like, you need to get out of there right now. And that's when Dragona is kind of just like, you know what, fuck it, like, it's time to use the stands. And they use smooth operators, and like, man, I love the stand. The stand is so cool. Like, just the things that the stand can, like, we've already seen the stand do, and like the things we're going to see the stand do in the future. Like, I really like smooth operators a lot. But basically they use smooth operators to like displace their thumb so that they can like slip the wire off, like literally just like push the wire off their hand. Like, very, very, very genius way of using this. It kind of like, it's funny, like, obviously I know why, like, to kind of build up the suspension and like, oh, how are they going to get out, but like, it's kind of funny that like theoretically they, like, both Dragona and Paco have the perfect stand to like escape this wire and like this string, and they didn't use it until, like, you know, so that you'd think like, just, I mean, just even like Dragona alone, like, you think smooth operators would be literally perfect, the perfect way to like get out of the situation, but you know, they've only used it till now. But like I said, it's a narrative thing, it's whatever. But yeah, it's just a really cool showing from smooth operators here. So Dragona's now free, and then Paco decides to use his stand to the hustle, and I said in like a couple chapters now that like, oh, like, I wonder if the hustle is the stand, is as we've seen it, where it's just his muscles moving, or if it actually has like a physical form. And I still think there's a chance it has a physical form that's revealed later on. Like, I could totally see Araki in like 2, 3, 4 years from now just being like, oh, okay, I just want to give the hustle a physical form. But for now, I think it's pretty much like we would have seen it by now if it had a physical form. So the hustle is what it is, which I think is cool. Like, I'm glad not every stand, you know, has a form. I do love seeing stand designs and like seeing what Araki can make up with them, but like at this point it's kind of like, it's good to have some variety. And like, I mean, I think we've had great variety so far with the stands, don't get me wrong, but I think it's cool that, like, you know what, this stand just doesn't have a form. Like, the hustle is what it is, so I think that's cool. But yeah, Paco basically uses the hustle to vibrate his muscles enough to have the scissor blade that snapped off earlier to cut the string. So now both are free, and that's great. And it's like, I don't know, like, I don't know if this is just a JoJo thing or a me thing, but like, it's kind of funny that like this big dramatic thing that we ended the last chapter on, like, oh, like, how are they going to get out? Like, I was interested in seeing how they were going to get out of it. Like, I thought they'd be like tied up in string a bit longer, given like, you know, the conclusion. But you know what, that's just my kind of thing, I guess. I think that's something I'm gonna have to learn to get used to in terms of like waiting monthly for stuff, because I'm so used to like things that would have been like left dramatic at the time, but for me, because I've been reading it, or like I've only caught up very recently, like we're pretty much right at the end of JoJolian. Like, this is my first time actually like waiting a month to see the conclusion or the continuation of stuff. Like, I don't know, like maybe if I had been reading JoJoLands like, you know, at the same time, like, you know, with no, well, like without having to wait a month basically, like maybe this wouldn't have felt like more of a dramatic thing, you know, because it would have been solved almost straight away. But you know what, I guess that's just how it is. But yeah, I think all things considered, I still think that they've gotten out of this situation just a bit earlier than I thought they would. Like, I thought maybe like towards the end of this chapter, like at least Paco would have still been in the string, but you know, it is what it is. I'm glad we're not spending too long on it. I guess that's better than, you know, it just being really dragged out. So now that they're free from the string stand, Dragona and the others try to leave, but as they're climbing through a window, Dragona notices that Paco's backpack with the diamond in it is open, the zip is open, and they're very confused. They're like, I swore I closed that. And as they turn around and go to pick up the diamond, we get my favourite panel in this chapter, where they look up and they realise that Rohan is right there around the corner watching them. And this is a really cool shot. I've seen a lot of people mention this, obviously, but this is a pretty cool callback to one of the original panels, one of the first times we saw Rohan in part 4, where he's like peeking around the door at Koichi. So that's a really cool callback there. There's another callback panel in a like coming up in a bit that's really cool as well. But yeah, this is my favourite panel in this chapter. To be honest, the whole page is really good, but I really like the bottom shot where like Dragona's reaching for the diamond and it's just Rohan's just there reaching for it at the same time too, and you see like, you know, Dragona's sweating because of the whole situation and realising that someone's there. Just a really, really cool shot. So yeah, Rohan has, you know, revealed himself to the group. He's confronted them finally after, you know, the whole of the last chapter being this kind of tense, like, oh, will they get out in time before Rohan finds them? And honestly, Rohan is honestly like a bit terrifying in this chapter, the way he confronts them, because it's like, again, kind of going back to what I was saying about, like, you know, this group not being very well versed in stands yet, and the whole versatility and the true potential of stands and stand users. And we're getting a really good clash here where we've got these kind of like rookies to the world of stands, and then we have Rohan, who obviously I still think is, you know, an alternate universe version of Rohan, so this isn't the part 4 Rohan that went through all that stuff. But, you know, judging by, if the theory is true that, you know, this is the Rohan that we've been seeing in some of the more recent Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohans, it's interesting that this is kind of like a dynamic of, like, you know, rookie stand users versus a very experienced stand user. And not even just like in stands, like Rohan very much knows a lot more about what's going on at the moment than obviously we do as the readers and as the group of, you know, characters we're following. So Rohan basically tells Dragona, like, don't pick up the diamond, if you do you'll be in grave danger. And then that's when Dragona actually like stands up, and, you know, Rohan's like, oh, I thought you were actually going to go for it. And then that's when Dragona's like, oh no, I just feel sorry for you because we're going to have to tie you up now. And then that's when Paco and Usagi come climbing back through the window, and Rohan picks up the diamond. He's got the diamond in his hands now, and that's when he's basically just like, you know, super confident, Rohan just being like, no, that's not what's going to happen here. And then that's when Dragona gets attacked by Heaven's Door. And I think I said the first time when Rohan showed up at the end of chapter 2, like, this was always going to be his stand. Like, I don't know why people were thinking it might be different. I saw some people on like Reddit and stuff being like, oh, I didn't actually, no, not so much thinking he was gonna have a different stand, but this nature of this thing of like, oh, if he has the same stand, like if he still has Heaven's Door, then it's clearly like the original universe Rohan. And I don't get that. I don't get that correlation, why like just him having Heaven's Door means he's the exact same. Like, we've seen stands that have like looked exactly the same as the previous, I guess their like original universe counterparts. Like the world was no different and was still Diego's stand, or like Dio's stand. Killer Queen looked exactly the same and was still Yoshikage Kira's stand. So like, that's not like, I don't know why some people would think that him having Heaven's Door still and Heaven's Door still looking the same would mean that like this is like, oh, this is clearly the OG universe Rohan. I don't know. I think obviously we might not know for a while. We might not never know. I still think we're probably never going to get a concrete answer if this is actually like the original Rohan or not. I don't think it is. Because that would just be just too confusing, I guess. But you know, it's JoJo, so what can you do? But yeah, anyway, so Rohan uses Heaven's Door, and that's when we get the ability reveal. We don't see the stand for a little bit yet, but we see the iconic page flipping on Dragona's hand open up, and then that's when Rohan's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to list out your identity now, like you're Dragona, you're 18, and obviously that freaks everyone out, because it's like, how does he know who we are? And Rohan's like, okay, like, let me read who you are a bit further, like, let me use it again on you to, you know, get more of like who you are and why you came here. And as he's walking towards them, he's telling them like how do you know about this diamond, like what do you know about this diamond, who told you to come here, like how much did you know when you came here. So obviously a lot going on with this diamond, more than just a simple heist. And this is when we get the other like callback panel to the iconic Dio walking towards Jodio panel from part 3, where Rohan moves towards Paco, who stands his ground, and like obviously they're all like, Usagi's freaking out and Dragona's like very kind of just almost just stunned, like, you know, as Rohan is just walking towards them, I guess, ready to advance on them and, you know, use Heaven's Door to find out what he wants. So as Rohan is walking towards Paco, ready to use Heaven's Door, and then we get another great showing from the Hustle and Paco, as Paco literally just jumps in the air and appears behind Rohan from above and grabs onto him, as Paco is using the Hustle to attach his muscles to like an air vent in the ceiling. And just a really cool panel here. This is probably my second favorite panel, this one here of Paco like, you know, like attached to the ceiling and like holding Rohan, you know, from behind and above. So that's really cool. And obviously it's just, again, this is the thing I've said, like I think I've said this in every review so far of this part, but like the stands in this part so far are just so interesting, and like they're just being used in such really just fun and creative ways. Like I never would have thought the hustle would ever have been used in this way when I first saw it in the first chapter. But yeah, like I just can't wait to see how these stands are going to be used in future chapters. Like honestly, like Araki went so hard with them in this part so far, and then, to be honest, that was like one of my biggest like praises of part 8 as well, because like part 8 was a very mixed part for me in general, but like I thought the stands in part 8 were honestly amazing. Like I thought some of them was so fun, and just the way they were designed and their abilities and their fights like were honestly amazing. So like it's not like, oh, you know, this is so much, like this is such an improvement. It's just like, it's just better on top of better, really. Like it's just so good that, like, you know, all these years later, after first using stands in part 3 all those years ago, like still to this day, like Araki can just make really interesting and unique stands. Like I really do applaud him for that. So as Paco basically has Rohan right where he wants him, Rohan basically gets out of the situation by basically just tossing the diamonds towards Usagi and Dragona, and as they tried to catch it, Rohan just chops Usagi in the side of the head, and then that obviously uses Heaven's Door on Usagi, and Usagi is just knocked out, he's sent flying, he crashes against the wall, he's out. And as Paco's, you know, trying to question Rohan, like, what the hell did you do? Rohan basically turns the tables on Paco and uses Heaven's Door on Paco as well. So Paco was knocked out and sent flying. And this is where we get probably my third favourite panel of this chapter, is when Rohan has just stood there in his little pose with his hands on his hips. Dragona stood opposite him doing the same, and Paco and Usagi are just laid out on the floor, knocked out, and they're just done. It was just really cool. Like, I just thought it was just a really funny shot. And then obviously as they're knocked out, Rohan uses the opportunity to get more info from them, and he basically just, you know, finds out their whole reason for being here, like that they were sent by Meryl to just steal the diamond for the money. And Rohan actually says like, oh, like, I'm relieved, like, your goal is so simple, like, you aren't here for the reasons that I thought you might have been here for. Like, I'm actually genuinely relieved, but like, you're still in a pretty, you know, dire situation right now. And as Dragona is like holding the diamond, we get to the final parts of this chapter now, and they kind of realize like something's wrong, like it's like almost vibrating in their hands, and Dragona's like telling themselves like, I'm sure that I had the diamond in my hand, like I can feel it in my hand right now, but when they open their hand, the diamond isn't in their hands anymore, it is dropped on the floor right beneath it, almost as if it went through their hands. And that's where the chapter ends. We get a little teaser there, like that the mystery of the diamond has deepened, and that's pretty much it. So I'll just go into my closing thoughts now and just talk about the chapter as a whole. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed this chapter, like a lot more than I thought I would, which is interesting because, I don't know, I guess it's the idea of like, oh, I've got to wait a month just to, you know, get another issue that's just, you know, one part of this like X part, you know, fight. Like, I don't know, like if I think if I compare this to like the first fight of JoJolian, like with what's his face, Ojiro and like Fun, I think I would have hated reading that fight monthly more. I'm not a big fan of that fight in general, but like when I look at that fight versus this fight, like I'm definitely way more invested in this fight, and like, yeah, it's just good that I, you know, despite my thing of like, oh, I've got to wait a month just to, you know, get another fight, because that thing of like, oh, you know, nothing's really going to get concluded here, we're not going to see, you know, the end result of anything. It's just going to be more questions, more cliffhangers and stuff. But, you know, not that it's a bad thing, but like, it's just something I have to get used to, you know, reading JoJo like monthly for the first time. I think I said before in a previous video, like I caught up to JoJo like right near the end of like part 8, like I think the first chapter where they jumped to Joseph in like the in the 40s or something, like the Radio Gaga incident, like, that was when I caught up. So like pretty much right at the end, like I only had to wait a month for the last chapter, and then that was it. And then, you know, a year plus of waiting for, you know, for part 9. But like, this is the first time like I've really like had to wait monthly, the fights and stuff like that. So it's just something I have to get used to. It's not a criticism against, you know, JoJo or manga or the part or the chapter or anything like that. It's just something that it's just something I have to get used to, like I said. But I mean, even with all that out of the way, like I still enjoyed this chapter. I thought it was really good. Some really great stuff. I'm really glad we got the confrontation with Rohan. Like finally, like these people clashed, and you know, they met Rohan. We saw Rohan stand finally. We finally saw Heaven's Door, and that was used in cool ways. Dragona and Paco and their stands were used in really cool ways. It's just a really cool chapter. Like I just really enjoyed it, which is funny because like I don't know, with the whole wait for like these monthly chapters I thought would be worse, but like it's honestly been fine. I've just been kind of like, oh, you know, the next JoJo chapter comes out in like 2 days, cool. Like, to be honest, I'll be honest, I didn't even read this chapter until like half an hour before I started recording this. Like, and I just, because it was like that kind of like preconceived, like, oh, you know, it's just another like it's just like one part of a longer fight. You know, that it's not important. I'm not gonna like. I will read it, but I'm not in any rush to read it like I was the other chapters. But no, it would even with that, I still really liked it. Highlights were definitely. To be honest, it was good that we got like such a heavy Dragona chapter. Like, obviously, I think Rohan was the main focus, but I definitely think number 2 was definitely Dragona. Like I said at the start of the video, I think it was cool that, you know, Jodio was honestly like gone for like the majority of this chapter, pretty much all of it outside of the first page. You know, it's good that other characters got in a spotlight, because that's been my thing that, like, I've been saying. I think when all's said and done, I think Dragona will probably be my favourite character, but I think at the moment they're not, because Jodio has had such a strong showing in the first 3 chapters that it's like, it's hard for me not to like Jodio more. But I think once we actually, like, you know, get deeper into the part, and, you know, Dragona will have their own fights, and, you know, Paka will have his own fights, and Usagi and whoever will have their own fights and their own arcs where they're the main character and the others aren't really focused. Like, it'll be good when we get to that point, but for now, yeah, like, it's just really good. Like, I'm just really enjoying it. It's just cool just to kind of like chug along. There's some ways where I'm still kind of like in awe that like part 9 is real and we're reading it monthly, and like this is a thing that exists, and like Jodio is a JoJo. Like, when I look at because it's so long now since I ever like got into JoJo, there's always been 8 JoJos, there's always been 8 parts, and now that like an addition has been added to both of those, like now there's another part, now there's another JoJo. Like, there's times like it doesn't feel real, which I thought would have been over by now, because like 4 months in you think like, oh, you would have gotten over it, but like now, like that whole thing of like, man, like part 9 of JoJo is here, like wow, like it's still crazy to me, which is really cool. But yeah, I'm just going to leave it here, really. I think, actually, no, there's one thing I did want to say, sorry. There's one thing that I said in the previous chapter review that I've always, like, been immediately proved wrong on, which is fine, I enjoy being proved wrong on stuff like this, is when Dragona took the diamond from the safe in the previous chapter, there was the bit of the rock in the safe, and I said something along the lines of, like, they've taken the diamond, but I think the rock is going to be the more important thing. Like, the diamond is just the distraction, and the rock is going to be what people are actually after. And I still think that might end up being the case in some way. But very interesting that there's actually something going on with the diamond. Like, obviously, like, Rohan is aware that there's something going on with the diamond, that there's something weird with it, and, you know, advises him, like, don't touch it. Like, it's wise for you to not touch the diamond. And obviously, at the end of the chapter, Dragona like has the diamond in their hands, and it drops on the floor somehow. It's somehow like as if it's gone through their hands, or like just dropped right straight through to the floor. And when they noticed earlier, like that the diamond had fallen out of Paco's bag when Dragona had like zipped it up, stuff like that, where it's like clearly there's something going on with the diamond. I think that's very interesting. I absolutely was not expecting the diamond to actually be, you know, an interesting plot device in any way. I thought it was purely a distraction, so that's really cool, and I think that's interesting that, you know, already my theory on that has been proven wrong. Like, I think that's great. Like, I love being proven wrong on JoJo stuff. Like, you know, when I have a theory like, oh, it's gonna go this way and it's completely wrong, I love that stuff. But yeah, other than that, that's really it, you know. Just another good chapter. I really enjoyed it. Obviously can't wait for chapter 5, so I'm just gonna head off now. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next month for the next chapter review. Thank you and goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.